Well, since I'm not sure where my nose is, but I do know where my Pokemon are going, it's back to the proverbial grindstone. And since we're doing this at daytime, I assume I'm not going to gain any fresh Pokemon anytime soon. That should help to avoid any more delays. For some reason I was expecting a Bug-type attack to not be very effective against Bug-types. It's not terribly often that you see something that turns out to be neutral to its own type. But then what do I know? The only Pokemon games under my Let's Play belt right now are the first generation and Pokemon Snap 1. And if nothing else, the sheer number of Bug-types in this early on part of the game should help Splendor to get up to par. Not that getting to level 8 is all that much of a climb. And great, even against a Pokemon that I can take down with Leech Life, it just doesn't have enough shots in it for us to do a lot of grinding with it. Granted, it's better than being stuck with just the move Splash, but still, Zubats really aren't anything special when you're first starting out with them. Well, the Pidgey is certainly out of the question. Good thing that normal moves from Stuart have a bit more kick to them. Unfortunately, Stuart just isn't that fast and definitely isn't particularly durable, so switching to him isn't doing us many favors. He's not a great guy to switch to, but again, nobody's especially great when you're less than level 10. Generally speaking, your starter and maybe a few especially reliable Pokemon like Spearow, Rattata, Pidgey, that's what you generally start off with. And good God, it's hard not to notice that the first Pokemon you get in Red or Blue tend to feel pretty damn good. You've got one or two options like Nidoran and Butterfree to help deal with Brock at the start. Everything else is solid, even if they aren't strictly great against rock typing. And I'm bracing myself for fighting against flying types here, so the grass and bugs we found so far aren't going to be especially useful. We don't have anything that's going to be super effective against Faulkner here. No electric or rocks. And that's part of why I was surprised to see the Poliwag. Why are we getting a water type this early on? We are finding a solid water type this early on, when the first two gyms are Flying and Bug, neither of which have any weakness to water. I wish I could have had access to a Poliwag back in the first generation, when I had to deal with Brock for the first gym. Though I'm pretty attached to my Generation 1 team makeup for my starter, Gyarados, Nidoking, Golem, and Alakazam. My number 6 was always more flexible, simply because I wasn't all that attached to them. I may like Arcanine more than Victory Bell, but frankly, Venusaur trumps Victory Bell by any measuring stick I can think of. Not really sure if I liked Charizard more than Arcanine, though. When I was growing up, I certainly did like it quite a bit. It hit all the right notes. Whenever I'm playing through the first generation or a remake of it now, though, even though I'm still tempted to pick Charmander at the start out of nostalgia, I don't have the same level of like. They have overdone Charizard quite a bit. I'm pretty sure even Wolverine from Marvel Comics and Batman from DC are looking at that lizard and feeling he's been overexposed. It's kind of hilarious. I don't feel like they overexposed Pikachu, and that's the mascot of the entire franchise. Why is Charizard hit so damn hard by that? And if the people making Pokemon designs feel that Charizard is the gold standard for designs, why keep reusing that specific Generation 1 design instead of making more designs for later generations that are inspired by that? Hell, I like the fact that with older Pokemon games, the designs go from cute to badass looking for so many of them. But there's a point, and I do not know when, that things become more anthropomorphic and cutesy as the generations went on. Don't get me wrong, I know there are plenty of anthro cuties in the first few generations, but there's a bit of a difference between Mudkip and his evolutions in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and that water-type starter from Sword and Shield. I'm not even gonna bother remembering that water sniper thing's name. I just remember wondering if the company that made the old Gex game could try to sue them over that. That was literally just a palette swap. Ugh. I probably shouldn't talk so much about designs from games that were far beyond when I was interested in playing the series, and just stick with the game we're currently going through. It's gonna be a long one, especially since I'm masochistic enough to not want to skip over the grinding I do along the journey. I would not be surprised if it takes me over 100 parts to finish this LP. Doubt that Flender's gonna be able to take anyone else down with what few shots he's got left in Leech Life. Time for him to start tagging in other Pokemon to share the experience with. Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel great to switch to Stewart, but everyone else I would send against a Pidgey this early on would just not end well, or at least anyone else who isn't at level 8 already. I suppose Bellram and Cramash are always options if I don't mind them getting up to 9 before we start heading to the first batch of trainers between us and the next town. I'm also pretty sure that Mothra and Gaban are the only ones who are really gonna be good against Pokemon that Flender is already gonna be good against when we're still in the grinding stage of things here, so yeah, not a lot of options this early on. Good God! 6 shots just to take down a level 3 Caterpie! Even when it strikes neutral, this is not a great move, even compared to moves like Tackle and Scratch. I suppose if we were running into some early game Psychics, that would be a nice trick to use, but I severely doubt we're gonna find any Psychic types between the first 2 gyms. Though I suppose I did manage to catch an Abra before trying to fight against Misty in Cerulean City, but Abra again fits into that category of Pokemon that starts weak and then becomes obscenely capable later on. We'll see just how many of those kinds of Pokemon end up on this team. We've already got Zubat here that'll turn into Crobat. Not that he's gonna be all that useful against Falkner, despite the fact that I've chosen him to be a permanent fixture on the team for the whole game. Unless he learns Bite sooner than I think he's going to, then he's gonna sit it out regardless of if he's level 8 or not. Not really sure what kind of role Hoppip is supposed to fill on a team. Maybe a support role of some kind? Not that support roles really feel right for me to use in a game where you're only allowed to have one combatant out at a time. Hell, even in games where you can have a party of 6 out at the same time, I do not seem to have much love for support moves. Not unless I'm in an especially tough spot and need a healer to keep everyone from dropping, or I'm facing an especially difficult foe that absolutely requires various buffs and debuffs. I'm just a very offense-oriented person when it comes to turn-based games. Probably a good reason why I tend to gravitate towards, fire starters in any given Pokemon generation. Not really sure what that says, though, when in some generations I like the grass type a hell of a lot more than the fires. Just 2 shots for that guy. That was nice and fast. Here's hoping the rest of Stuart's fights are that quick in this clip, since I don't think we're going to be moving on to the next town anytime soon. Especially not since Uzumaki is still level 4, and we're definitely going to want him to be 8 before we head out. Giban probably will as well, if only because I want the ability to poison things. So, possibly getting a Beedrill before the second gym will be a decent idea. And great, Stuart is nearly knocked out again. If I named him Sherman instead, would he be more durable? Oh, am I kidding? Centrets and Ferrets aren't all that tanky. They just have incredibly good move pools that are crippled by the fact that they only know 4 moves at once. I know that's a thing for gameplay balance, but still, if we didn't have that move limitation, then the normal types would be the most dominant force, not Dragon or Psychic. Kinda makes me think that normal shouldn't be the right word for that type. Not that there's really a nice, short, memorable way to, say something is a jack of all trades. Oh dear, Bubble isn't doing all that much even with a water type using it. Understandable, but still a little annoying. Ah well, at least I'm less likely to switch if we see a Pidgey here. The only reason we got out of that one in such good condition is because this worm keeps sticking with the slowdown move here. If the bastard had just constantly tackled, then Uzumaki would be pretty mangled by the time we go to the next fight. But I suppose it makes a good amount of sense that wild Pokemon don't make the best tactical decisions. If they were especially badass without a trainer, then it'd be harder to feel like we're convincing them to join us. Not that it really comes across as a friendly process, considering the word used for it is capture. Much like evolution, I'm sure the word is used more for the sake of it being simple and memorable rather than accurate. And much like the whole battle for growth thing, it feels like something that was meant to be purely a gameplay mechanic but ended up being used in all the media in such a way that it makes things a little less pleasant than it tries to be. Seriously, if you step back and think about it, this world is essentially populated by a bunch of superpowered orcs. Combat is an obscenely big part of their life cycle, and it's shaped how society works around them. It's just that the orcs in this world are also My Little Pony fans, and have literally turned friendship into magic. It's just such an interesting world to come back to on occasion, and I can't help wishing that the game did more to help build the world around us instead of the series as a whole just kind of stagnating after a certain point. The franchise could afford to stagnate considering how much money it makes. Still, it's hard not to wish that it just continued to improve game after game. There is always room for improvement. And when you're talking about the single largest money-making franchise on the planet, stagnation is a choice, not a necessity. We're certainly gaining quite a bit of experience from these bugs, that's for sure. Wonder how many clips it'll take for us to see significantly diminishing returns on the experience bar. Great. Now I can't help wondering the possible uses a trainer might have for any string shots their Pokemon end up taking. Or does it just dissolve on its own before it could possibly get any kind of utilitarian use by the ones that have been sprayed with it over and over again? Hell, I seem to recall the anime occasionally did some things with string shot and other status effect moves that were creative tricks for how to handle an enemy at times. That might even be one of the reasons the game designers don't like the idea of animating things any better than how they did in the Pokemon Stadium games. They don't want to do a nice animation for some of the non-attack moves that would make the player question why it isn't treated as a damage-inflicting attack. Though I suppose laziness and lack of time from one game to the next is probably the better explanation. Well, that one certainly went down to the wire. Back to the Pokemon Center. Uzumaki has certainly been growing at a faster pace than Splendor, that's for sure. Oh, I'm sure you'll see us in a few more times before we move on to the next town. This clip still has several minutes left, and I do not think I make it to the next town in all that time. Sorry to anyone who prefers these kinds of journeys to move along at a bit of a faster pace than this. It's not like anyone's gonna have all that much of a sense of wonder as we move from place to place or grind in a Game Boy Color game. And it's not like I have any especially unique flair or style as we go from clip to clip. I am very much average when it comes to being a Pokemon trainer, in every respect, and I know it. Still, I hope those willing to sit through an entire playthrough from someone as average as me find some measure of enjoyment through it all. I know I'm having fun just working on this project, even if I'm looking at the sheer amount of footage I'm recorded, and I'm going, what the hell was I thinking, as I keep working on it? I'm sorry to say that hypnosis is not a move I'm all that likely to use. In fact, I think I already mentioned this back when we were still going through the first section of Earl's Academy. I also haven't quite decided if I'm going to use the other bits of footage from Earl's Academy later on in this playthrough, or just delete it all, seeing as how the first bit dragged on a bit longer than I was expecting. I'm just going clip by clip, seeing how much I can get through in each, and not really planning things out all that much. And since I don't have any specific teams in mind for this or any future Pokemon game I play through, things will probably feel a bit more organic than when I just planned out two entirely different teams for the first generation and had them slap each other around in Pokemon Stadium on occasion. I always knew that the team I was using for the main playthrough of the first generation was going to be the A-team, and the other team would be kind of doomed to get their asses kicked. But in every other generation of Pokemon, I don't really think as much about who is going to be on the team from beginning to end. There is little to no pre-planning phase with anything past the first generation for me, simply because I'm out of the Kanto, and I'm not even going to bother memorizing everything around me past that region. The routes, the things we run into on those routes, the places I should expect to find various things, it's all essentially me rediscovering these bits over and over again with the second and third generations, and if I ever get around to working on the fourth or further, or do any fan games, I'm essentially going to be going in blind. Because again, when I was a kid, I dropped off after the third generation games. As much as I like the Pokemon franchise as a whole, as much as I like the world and universe, there are a lot of role-player games out there worth exploring, and I was hungry for storytelling back then. And of all the things that Pokemon grew to be a king for, storytelling was never it, even if there have been some improvements over the decades. There is no way Pokemon can compete with the likes of Shin Megami Tensei, Mass Effect, or numerous other role-player titles that have had varying amounts of respect over the years. Again, it's frustrating to deal with the fact that Pokemon has stagnated and barely moved forward at all, when it's undeniably the greatest franchise in the RPG market. I have seen some pretty good franchises end up going to some amazing heights and never become as much of a household name as Pokemon. My sister has seen little to nothing Pokemon related and knows more about it than I do. She has never watched the anime, never read the manga, never seen any of the movies or played the games, and she still somehow manages to know enough to correct me on occasion. Pokemon took off when she was in high school and college, around there, so it's not like she grew up on it like I did. But due to sheer cultural osmosis from interacting with a lot of teens in various school systems, she has learned quite a bit of it. It's funny how she's not a fan but still knows so damn much, and I can't think of too many other possible franchises with that kind of impact. And Flender is out of ammo just a little distance away from level 8. That's certainly crappy luck. Is Kaban gonna manage to evolve before Flender gets to level 8? Apparently not, because I'm hitting the Pokemon Center instead of just doing the whole switching thing because Flender ran out of leech life charges. And why am I bothering to use that attack instead of a bloody bird? It's got such a limited number of shots for such a weak strike. I'm pretty sure the only reason I'm going to bother having it for any extended period of time is because it's the only bug-type move that we're likely to have, and bug moves are supposed to be especially good against psychics. Ugh. Right, well, I'd say that's enough grinding for one clip. We're just going to heal one more time, save, and call it a day. Or at least call it a clip. I wouldn't be surprised if I've recorded more on the particular day when this session happened.